Shabbat Shalom, everyone, and welcome to this week's Shabbat teaching. And we are finishing with the book of Leviticus this week with a double portion. And the first parasha is Behar, which means on the mountain or at the mountain, and Bechukutai, which is in my statutes, the second parasha. So we read this from Leviticus 25, verse 1, till the end of Leviticus, which is 27:34. We read Jeremiah 16, verse 19 to Jeremiah 17:14, Matthew 21:33 and onwards, and Jeremiah 32, verses 6 to 27. So we continue to learn to walk with the Father, and we continue with the process of seeing where we're at. And also that we see that, and we started to see that there's a gap between us and the Father reveals to us more and more about his heart and what he wants and what he expects from us with every week's portion. You see, the book of Leviticus shows, like I said, there's a gap between us and the Father, and how obedience to him and relationship with him closes this gap so that I can go into his presence and where we fellowship with the Father. So the first parasha for the week is, like I said, Behar, and it talks about the laws of the Shemitah. And the Shemitah is this 7-year period. And so for 6 years, the Israelites worked the land and they planted the land and they harvest from the land. But the 7th year, they should let the land rest. So the Shemitah is for the land to rest and not we as men. Because we have the Shabbat, the weekly Shabbat, the 7th day of every week. That's where we rest. And the year, the Shemitah is for the land to rest on the 7th year. So you can basically say the Shemitah is the Shabbat for the land. The Shemitah is about resting the land and also the release of debt. So whatever was owed to you should have been paid up by the 7th year. And that is normally how all the arrangements or agreements would have been settled at that period of time. And then after that 7 years, or at that 7 years, if there's still any debt, then you had to release that debt. So whatever is due to you must be written off, basically. And importantly, debt was given without interest. So every 7 years, the land and everything in it were debt-free. And this we see as a shadow of what Messiah had done on the cross and will be completed with the millennial kingdom. So in Messiah, we are debt-free of our sins. But this parasha also talks about the Jubilee year and the restoration. And the restoration of the land that is to be given back to the previous owners. And also the set free of all the slaves. So this, also the basis of the Shemitah and the Jubilee, is about rest and restoration. This parasha also deals with other debts and issues and restorations, and we see this picture of how ABBA YAH will restore us out of our debts and restores us back to him and the kingdom he has for us. So we basically see the Father does not want us to be in debt. Everything about this parasha, it's to be restored, it's to be out of debt. And that is the heart of the Father for us. In the second parasha of this week, which is the parasha Bechukutai, we see the Father talks about his statutes and commands and promises and blessings if we follow and obey his instructions. We clearly see here that the Father calls us to obedience and not to suffering. And we need to understand this. It's not Father's heart for you and me to suffer. Suffering is a result of my choices, my decisions I make because of my own free will, because I turn my back on the Father. You see, suffering is when I follow my ways and not the Father's ways. This parasha is all about blessing if we walk the Father's ways. The Father's intention is for us to seek his heart and his ways. Even in our disobedience, Father, give us a chance to repent and grace to turn back to Him. And then if we persist with our disobedience, then Satan will come upon us because he then gives us over to our own heart's desires. And this parasha talks about tithing and giving back and being blessed in everything. To live in the Father's peace and favor. So if we can just quickly recap. We learned that the book of Leviticus flows out of the book of Exodus. In other words, when we studied Leviticus, we kept on going back to Exodus, and we saw it's like walking with one foot in front of the other, where you need both your feet to get to your destination. And so it is with these two books. I need to study the book of Exodus first, get to know the tabernacle. Then it's like to start walking with that Exodus foot and then step forward with the Leviticus foot. So I need both to move forward in my relationship with the Father. Because it's a complete picture. When we study Exodus and Leviticus, we get the fullness of the Father's heart. We see the fullness of His presence, how to enter into His presence. We get to see the fullness of the tabernacle. When Father says He's created you and me, and we're supposed to be His temple, His dwelling place, Exodus and Leviticus give us the completeness of that picture. You see, Father starts showing us in Exodus His presence, His glory, and that we should approach Him. And in Leviticus, we get to learn the way of approaching the Father. We get to learn what we must do. Yes, what we must do. Because I need to walk out my salvation. I need to walk out this road to the way of the Father's heart. I need to walk like Messiah Yeshua walked. So I need to do something to live in this kingdom of the Father. I need to do something to live a set-apart life. That's what the Father wants from me, how He wants me to live. The Bible teaches me that I'm blessed if my halacha, if my walk is to the Father's will. You see, Leviticus teaches us that the Father must be reflected in my walk. Why? So that the nations and the people around us can see His presence in us, in our midst. The nations need to see whom I serve, and in these times that we are living in right now, it becomes more important to live and love like Messiah did. To live and love like so that everyone can see the presence of the Father. If Messiah Yeshua said that He came to earth to bring the presence of the Father, to bring heaven to earth, and I represent the Father, then I need to do exactly the same now. The presence of the Father should be in me. I should be reflecting His presence. So to come into a relationship with the Father, I need to be clean. I need to walk a holy life. That is what we learn out of Leviticus. That is the heart of the Father, for Him to walk or to dwell within His creation. And then He says, He'll make us fruitful. Read with me Leviticus 26, verse 9 to 13. Leviticus 26, verse 9 to 13, and it says, "And I shall turn to you and make you fruitful, and shall increase you, and shall establish my covenant with you. And you shall eat the old supply and clear out the old because of the new. And I shall set my dwelling place in your midst, and my being shall not reject you. And I shall walk in your midst, and shall be your Eloah, and you shall be my people. I am Yahuwah, your Eloah, who brought you out of the land of Mitzrayim from being their slaves. And I have broken the bars of your yoke and made you walk upright." So a few things we need to take notice of here in these verses. The first thing we get to see is that Abba Yah is sharing his heart with you and me. Father is telling us about a blessing that he pour out on you and me, a blessing that he'll pour out onto Israel, a blessing that he'll pour out onto his bride, his children. So Father is confirming a few things here today. Abba confirms a covenant with you and me. Abba confirms his presence with us. In other words, in our midst. He says you'll be an allure to you and me. And lastly, he says, with obedience, with all of this, he says, I'll break the bars of your yokes. Father says he'll make us walk upright. So we see Father desires to be with you and me. He adores us. And he wants to be with us. So let's study these verses. Let's see what Father means with every promise he makes in these verses. The first promise Father gives, he says, okay, he confirms a covenant. You see, Father brought the Israelites, or the multitude of nations, out of Egypt to Mount Sinai, and there he gave them the covenant. He gave them the commandments. Under the chuppah of the cloud, everyone said yes, and everyone confirmed this covenant with the Father. You see, over and over and over in the Father's word, he confirms the covenant he made. So Father says to build his tabernacle, which they did. Abba gave Moses the instructions to build this covenant, or this tabernacle, which is a picture of his covenant with them. You see, Abba makes his covenant visible in their lives, just as he does in our lives by filling us with his ruach and with the gifts and the fruits of the Spirit. So now Father is in us, and he asks for us to live because, or we need to live and to show that he is in us, because the nations need to see him. The nations needs to experience the Father through you and me. Leviticus 26 verse 9 says, and I shall turn to you and make you fruitful. That which we've just read. And he says, you shall increase and he shall establish his covenant with you and me. This establish is the Strong's Concordance number H6965. It's the word kum. And this word means to arise, to rise up, to stand up, be confirmed. Establish means to be confirmed. But listen to this. It means become powerful. It means to strengthen. So Father is saying that his covenant with you and me will strengthen us. His covenant will strengthen, will make you and me powerful. Isn't this what Yeshua came to do? He came to strengthen us, to cause us to stand up. He did not come to do away with the word and the instructions of the Father. He came to show us how to have strength in obedience to his instructions, how to stand on his word. Yeshua came to let the word live strong within you and me. Can we see the covenant that the Father makes with us? How he establishes us. How he establishes his word and his truth within us. Father makes promises to keep them, guys. Abba does not make a promise to break a promise. He does not make a promise with you and me to change his mind on a later stage. Father does not make a promise to do away with it. So Abba establishes through his word. He builds us up through his word. The Bible teaches us his word will never return back to him empty. We read in Isaiah 55:10 and 11, for as the rain comes down and the snow from the heavens, and do not return there, but water the earth and make it bring forth and bud and give seed to the sower and bread to the eater, so is my word that goes forth from my mouth. It does not return to me empty, but shall do what I please, and shall certainly accomplish what I sent it for. This is amazing, amazing verses that we just read here. Father's word is like a blessing unto those who hear it and believe it. Can we see this picture today? ABBA YAH is saying that his word does not just fall to the ground, but there's a purpose to his word. There's life in his word. Just like the raindrop, it does not just fall onto the ground and becomes nothing. It does not just fall onto the ground without purpose, but it gives life. The Father's word is never useless or ineffective. Whatever the Father pleases with his spoken word, it will be accomplished. Father says it will be accomplished through this powerful word of his. Whatever he sends it out to do, it will be done. So not only will his word purpose it exactly what he sent it out to do, but it will prosper and it will multiply. You see, that is the truth of life. Imagine a single raindrop that gives life to a plant. Imagine a single life drop a drop of rain or water that gives life to a tree. And then that tree grows up and it brings forth fruit. And that fruit in turn feeds you and me. In other words, that tree gives life to you and me. In just the same way, that is how the word and the truth of the Father works. Abba speaks life into me and you. The Father speaks a word or a promise that keeps me, that protects me, that provides for me, that heals me, that's life to me. Father blows life into you and me through his word. And that ends up giving life to someone else again. And the same, it's with you and me following and doing his instructions. It sets me free. It gives me life. And in turn, I give life unto others. Can we see this picture of a tree today? A seed that's planted by the Father, and then then the water comes through his ruach, and this tree grows and grows and grows, and then the fruit comes. And out of the fruit, the nations get to eat. Out of that fruit, our community gets to eat. That's how Father says, that's his word through you and me. That's how he uses you and me as a vessel. That is why we're also instructed to testify, to witness to others about the life and the freedom the Father gives us. And so my life, the way I live, will be a reflection of who he is and the life he gives me. You see, Father builds on his covenants. Abba builds on his word through the Bible, and Father confirms life to you and me through his word. Even if we go back to Genesis, then we see the same promises. The same covenant Father made to Abraham, to Isaac, to Jacob. Father does not change, guys. He's the same today, tomorrow, and as he was yesterday. Father reaffirms, he confirms, he establishes covenant with his people. So what are we learning today? Today we learn that the Father established a covenant. And he established a covenant with his people, with his children, with his bride. We see that ABBA YAH ends up, and the Father is telling us that there's a pathway for you and me to enter into relationship with him. And when we do, he establishes a covenant with you and me. Father establishes his word and his blessing, his promises with you and me when we decide to walk with him, when we become one with his presence. Can we see today this promises and blessings is not for everyone? These promises and the blessings from the Father is not for everyone. It is not for those who turn their back on the Father. It is not for those who plays with the holiness of the Father. When you and I are serious about Him, then ABBA YAH comes and He establishes His covenant with you and me. So are we going to walk with Him? Do things His ways? Or are we just going to continue doing things the way we want to do? You see, Leviticus is all about the presence of the Father, how we enter into His presence His way. It's not to come with this blasé attitude of it's just Sunday worship and I'm in the church and I go home and I do my lifestyle. It's not about being lukewarm. When we want to enter into the presence of the Father, then it's a committed lifestyle, guys. I want to use those words today. To enter into the presence of the Father is a committed lifestyle focused on His presence. We have to make a decision. ABBA makes it clear that sooner or later, we all will have to make that decision to choose life, to choose this committed lifestyle. And if we do not, if I then choose not to commit to Him, then the word clearly makes it clear to me and you there's an eternal destiny of death, to be removed from His presence. If we do not choose His presence now, if we do not commit to the presence of the Father, then there will be a time coming when I will be removed eternally from the presence of the Father. Jeremiah 31:33 says, "For this is the covenant I shall make with the house of Israel after those days, declares Yahweh. I shall put my Torah in their inward parts and write it on their hearts. And I shall be their Eloah, and they shall be my people." So Father is confirming His presence in us through obedience. You see, a covenant according to the Father is His Torah obedience. His word, His instructions in us. In fact, the Father says it will be written on our hearts. In other words, His word will be life to you and me. It will be a lifestyle, a love style to you and me. ABBA says He'll write the Torah on our hearts. So let's just quickly see, well, what is the function of the heart? In the physical, we see that the human heart is one of the most important organs responsible for sustaining life. It's a muscular organ with 4 chambers. The human heart functions throughout a person's lifespan and is one of the most robust and hardest working muscles in the human body. Pumping blood is the chief and only function of the heart, pumping blood to the rest of the body. So in a nutshell, all these big words, this is what the science world says what the heart is. This is what they teach us about the heart. But let's see what Father says. Let's see what the Father teaches you and me about our heart. What is Father's pictures of a heart? We, of course, have this physical heart, like I've just explained what the science world says our heart is. But let's have a look at what the Bible says. The word describes our hearts. The Hebrew word is the word lev. And it's this non-physical aspect of our hearts. Deuteronomy 6 verse 5 says, "And you shall love Yahweh your Eloah with all your heart, with all your being, with all your might." So can we see the commitment that is required from our hearts when the Father says, "with all your heart"? So when He says with all your heart, immediately we need to understand there's much more to our hearts than just a decision I make. There's much more to our hearts than just some emotion I'm feeling. And then He says with all your being, with all your might. So what is this non-physical part of our hearts? In Hebrew, we learn and understand that the heart, like I've just said, is this lev, this Hebrew word. And it is the center of human thought and spiritual life. We tend to think that the heart refers mainly to our emotions, but in Hebrew it also refers to one's mind and thoughts as well. When I went to Google and I started looking for verses about hearts, guys, there's literally hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of verses in the Bible talking about our hearts, talking about the physical, but also this emotional, soul, spiritual characteristics of our hearts. In 1 John 4 verse 4, it says that Abba is spirit. So what does Father sees and what does he says about our emotional, spiritual hearts? As we've learned through the Bible that we are created body, soul, and spirit. Our heart is not just a fourth or a separate part of our complete being. No, our heart, according to the Bible, is everything about my soul, our mind, our emotions, and our wills. And then, as we're going to see today, very importantly, it's our conscience as well. When we read Matthew 9 verse 4, then we say, and Yahushua, knowing their thoughts, in other words, their hearts, said, why do you think wicked thoughts in your hearts? So can we see this? Wicked thoughts in our hearts? So it's not just a mind thing here, guys. It's not just something in my brain here. Thinking is something of the mind normally, but Messiah asked the people why they were thinking in their hearts. This shows that our mind is part of our hearts. Acts 11:23 says, who, having come and seeing the favor of Eloah, was glad and encouraged them all with purpose of heart to cleave to the Master. To purpose means to decide strongly to do something. To use your or our will. So this verse shows that our will is part of our hearts. John 16:22. And you therefore have grieved now, but I shall see you again, and your heart shall rejoice, and no one takes your joy away from you. So we experience emotions in our hearts. And here we see that our heart rejoices. So this verse says that our emotions is part of our hearts. Hebrew 10:22 says, let us draw near with a true heart in completeness of belief, having our hearts sprinkled from a wicked conscience and our bodies washed with clean water. As this verse shows, our conscience is part of our heart. And this is also confirmed by 1 John 3:20 that talks about that if our heart condemns us. So according to the Bible, our heart is not simply something we feel emotions with. It's much more. Because it's about our mind, our will, our emotions, our conscience. Our heart also thinks. Our heart does much more than what we sometimes think. We just experience some love or some joy. Our heart decides. Our heart senses right from wrong. So can we see the purpose of our hearts? It's not just to send blood through the whole body for all our organs. But a heart is a vessel through which we feel emotion, through which we love, through which we decide and choose, through which we believe. And importantly, that is where Ruach convicts me and you of all our doings. In other words, the heart becomes both the entrance and the exit of our being. Whatever enters into us must enter through the heart. Whatever comes out from us proceeds or exits through the heart. And isn't this exactly what we've learned a few weeks ago regarding Lashon Hara? Isn't this exactly what we've learned about our tongues? Whatever leaves my tongue, the goodness of that out of the goodness of my heart, or the evilness of my tongue out of my evil inclinations of my heart. You see, whatever exits this body, starts from my heart and then exits through my tongue. You see, Father is not just telling us about His Torah, His instructions, but He's writing it on our hearts. Father writes it on our consciousness. He writes it in our minds, which is our hearts. He writes it on our emotions. He writes it on my will. He writes it there where I make it my decisions. You see, the word of the Father should be an experience, and we experience it through our hearts. We should feel His word with every emotion. We should experience the love of and the heart of the Father through His word, through our hearts. That is why the word of the Father changes us to be more like Him. Our hearts must become like His heart. The second point, Abba says, His presence within us. Father dwells in us. In other words, it is a place where He wants to reside. He's looking for permanent residency. That is exactly what the idea or the picture of the tabernacle is all about. If we are the temple, if we are the tabernacle, then it's all about Him in us. That was the function and the purpose of the tabernacle, is for the Father to come down from heaven to dwell with His people. So the Mishkan, the temple, His dwelling place, now you and me, it's all about Father, the Most High, dwelling in you and me. We read Leviticus 26 verse 11 to 12, and I shall set my dwelling place in your midst, and my being shall not reject you. And I shall walk in your midst, and shall be your allure, and you shall be my people. You see, Father says He shall put His dwelling place in our midst. And like we've just learned, that midst is our heart. The Hebrew word for midst, it's a strong concordance number H8432. H8432. It's a Hebrew word tafek. It means in the center. So right in the center of my being, right in the center of my heart, right in the center of everything, that is where the Father wants to be. Right in the center of your life, that is where the Father wants to be. He says, in your midst. So right in the center of who I am, that's where the Father wants to be. So can we see that Abba Yah says that in the center of your camp, that is where He wants to be. In the center of your everyday life, that is where He wants to be. So not just in the center of the community, not just in the center of everyone's daily life, but right in the center of who we are, guys. That is where the Father wants to be. 1 Corinthians 6 verse 19 says, or do you not know that your body is the dwelling place of the set-apart Spirit who is in you, which you have from Elohim, and you are not your own? So can we see? Father says He is in us, in the center of us, in the place that He created for Himself. That is where He wants to be. And then He is in control, and not us, because He says we are not our own. Father dwells in us, not just around us, but also in us. And what better place to be in a relationship with the person, to be in the center of his life. That is what the Father wants. You see, because when He's in the center of our lives, that is the fullness of this relationship. That is why I am holy. Again, like we've said in previous teachings, nothing I can do can make me holy. Only Abba gets to determine holiness. And He says, when He is in my center, then I am holy, because He is now in me and He is holy. So Father makes me holy. His presence in me makes me holy. Abba Yah wants to make His presence in us visible. Father wants to reveal Himself through you and me. So do we want Abba Yah to walk with us? Do we want Him to be the center of who we are, in the center of our lives? Then we have to follow His Torah. We have to follow His instructions. Leviticus 26:3 says, if you walk in my laws and guard my commandments and shall do them. Can we see what the Father says? He says, if you walk. In other words, we do not have to follow the instructions. We do not have to be obedient. But if we do, then Father will come and be the center of our lives. Obedience to his instructions equals his presence. Can we see this today? Obedience to the Father's Torah, to his instructions, equals his presence. Abba does not stay in uncleanness. Abba does not stay in a vessel that is profaned. He says we must be purified. And his word purifies us. When we listen, when we obey, when we do and act according to his word, then he says he purifies us. And when we purified, we holy, because then my center becomes his presence. So disobedience divides us from the Father. Abba does not say be perfect. He does not say be sinless. Father says we must live in relationship with him and do his instructions. And this we could see from Abraham. We see this from Moses, from Noah, from David's lives. They weren't perfect. They had issues and they had faults. But Father found them righteous because they seeked the Father's heart. They seeked the Father's presence. Let me put it to you like this today. Do we want to be in a relationship with our Creator? Do we want to serve our Creator? Or are we looking for a God that will give me what I want? Do we like the idea of serving a God? Are we in love with the idea of serving a God? Because we meet so many people that say they are religious. And you know, to be religious means that you are following or you are serving some God. You are following or you're serving some God's instructions or his rituals or whatever. You see, that, my dear brother and sister, is idol worship. But when my focus is on the Creator, then I'm not serving him out of this idea of who he is. I'm serving him out of love. You see, when we serve a God or the idea of a God, then it is what I can get out of it. When we serve a God, then it's all about rituals. When we serve a God, then it's all about religions. But when we serve Abba Yah, it's about relationship. That is Leviticus. Leviticus is not about rituals. Leviticus is not about religions. It's about relationship. When serving a God, my focus is on me. But if I serve Abba Yah, then my focus is on him. Maybe I should ask this question. Do we feel justified in serving Abba? And this is a question only you and I can answer, my dear brother and sister, and we must take this serious today. Because listen to the implication of this. Do we feel justified in serving Abba Yah? Do I feel that when I serve him, that I should get something out of my service to him? If so, then I should know I'm not in a relationship. You see, then I serve the idea of who he is. Then it's like I've heard about him, so I'm going to serve him, follow him, but I don't truly know him. Do we feel justified in serving Abba Yah? If so, then I'm not in relationship with him. I'm in love with the idea of him, or I like the idea of him. And that, my brother and sister, is idol worship. That is lukewarmness. To serve the Father is not a question of being led by feelings. is being led by getting something out of it. But to serve Father, to serve the Creator, the Most High, Abba Yah, he says we must serve him out of love. And my love becomes an action of servanthood. Don't we see this today? Where I serve the Most High King and my love for him becomes my action of servanthood for him and his community. Matthew 6:33 says, but seek first the reign or the kingdom of Elohim and his righteousness, and all these shall be added to you. Abba first. Everything in my life, Abba first. What I do, Abba first. What I think, Abba first. What I plan, Abba first. You see, serving Abba Yah is not a self-help scheme or program. It's not about what I can benefit out of this or how I can better myself, because what happens if I do not get out of this serving this God or this King or Abba Yah? What happens if I do not get what I want out of this? Will I then continue to serve him? You see, is my focus truly on him, or is my focus on me? Doesn't the word teach us to walk by faith and not by sight? So it's not what I see or what I get, isn't it? You see, so many times we hear this motivational teachings and messages being preached from the pulpit. Why is that? We must so many times be motivated to serve the Father because we always want something first, isn't it? Sometimes our worldly mindset shows us or teaches us that we need to get something. If I serve someone, I need to get something out of that. If I do something for someone, I need to get something out of that. So we must be motivated to do things. And you know, to get paid is motivation. To get something out of an agreement, to get something out of a relationship, to get something out of what you do and serve, that is motivation to do whatever you do. Father is not here to motivate me and you to serve him or to follow him or to be obedient to him. He gives us a choice and say, you choose. You see, Father does not say, choose me and then I'll do all of this. He says, choose me above all. Father has already paid the price. He has already equipped you and me for this walk. Abba has already given us his word, his son. He's already given us his ruach. Then he says, now choose. You see, motivation is all about me. It's about me being motivated to do what I think I should do, to do what I want to get out of it. But servanthood is doing out of love. It's not about me, but about the one being served. That is servanthood. You see, being motivated to do something normally ends up with me being motivated. But when we do out of love, you see, when we serve out of love, we grow in relationship. When we serve out of love, we grow in that presence of that person. When we serve out of love, then it's driven by Ruach. So the Father, Abba wants us to serve him out of love and not motivation. It's not about what he gives us. It's not about what you and I can get out of it, but he says he wants to be the center of our lives. You see, what happens if we serve Father, if we serve Abba Yah out of motivation? You see, because when I do not get what I want, then I start to think, but the Father doesn't love me no more. Then we start to think he does not exist. Then we start acting or we start thinking that he's not real. Then we think and say that he's not in control. You see, and that is false love, and that is driven by motivation. Because we want things. Because we want Him to live on our wants and our needs. That's sometimes why we follow the Father. You see, because sometimes we see Father and we go to Him with a shopping list of things. And if He doesn't comply to you and my shopping list, then we get demotivated. And when that happens, my brothers and sisters, because we do not walk in love. Do we love the Father for who He is or for what He can do for us? So going back just a bit with the question, do we serve the idea of a God, or do we serve the Father truly in love? You see, serving the Father, it's about Him and the relationship with Him. It's not about my shopping list of things. My focus is on Him and not me. Abba does not change. I must change. When Messiah says, go and sin no more, He says, stop violating Torah. Stop being disobedient to His instructions. So not to live the instructions of the Father is coming up against Him. It's standing up against Him. It's violating who He is. It's violating His word. We read in Psalms 14:2, Yahuwah looked down from the heavens on the sons of mankind to see if there's a wise one seeking Yahuwah. Are we seeking the Father? Are we seeking Him to make Him the center of our lives? Deuteronomy 4:29 says, but from there you shall seek Yahuwah your Eloah, and shall find when you search for Him with all your heart, with all your being. You see, when we search for the Father, are we searching with our hearts? Are we searching with this love for the Father? Are we searching the fullness of who He is? Are we searching Him so that He can complete you and me? Or are we searching for His blessings? Jeremiah 29, verse 12 to 14 says, then you shall call on me, and shall come and pray to me, and I shall listen to you. And you shall seek me and shall find me when you search for me with all your heart. And I shall be found by you, declares Yahuwah. And I shall turn back your captivity and shall gather you from all the nations and from the places where I've driven you, declares Yahuwah. And I shall bring you back to the place from which I have exiled you. You see, the Father will bring us back to His presence. We are called to repent. We are called to seek and to find Him. Can we see this today? All of this is an action I need to do or to live out. And then when we find Him, then we need to follow Him. 1 John 2 verse 3 to 6 says, and by this we know that we know Him, if we guard His commands. The one who says, I know Him, in other words, the one who says, I follow Him, and does not guard His commands is a liar. If you and I say that we focused on Messiah, we focused on our King, if we say that we know Him, if we say that we follow Him, and we do not do His commands, then you and I are lying. Then He says the truth is not in us. But whoever guards His word, truly the love of Allah has been perfected Him. Because perfected means the presence of the Father is in us. By this we know that we are in Him. The one who says he stays in Him ought himself also to walk, even as He walked. Yeshua lived the Torah. He walked the Torah. So when I seek Him, when I find Him, then He says, follow me. And then I should do the same. Then I should do what He did. You see, when I find the Father, when I live His Torah, then I'm not motivated by things. Because the fullness of the Father, the love of the Father is in the center of who I am. Then I live it. then I breathe Him. Then I shine His light. Then I am who He called me to be. Then I can worship Him in the fullness of what He created me to be. Isn't that your purpose and my purpose? To worship the Father? To live in His fullness, just like Adam and Chava did? Just like the Father wants to be with us? To live in the fullness of who He is, to live in His presence, to be filled with His Ruach? May we seek the Father out of love. Let's pray. Abba Yahuwah, our Creator and Most High Father. Abba, to You belong all the praise, all the praises and all the glory, Father. To You belong all the esteem, all the glory. My Father, thank You that You are who Your word says You are, Father, and thank You that we can study who You are, Father, not to get things from You, Father, not to be motivated to follow You, Father, but to follow You out of love, Father. To follow You out of a relationship with You, my Father. Abba, so that we can speak like Your Son spoke, to say that we only say what You tell us to say. We only do what You tell us to do, Father. Not to seek our own kingdoms, Abba, not to be filled with our own needs and wants, Abba, but to seek the fullness of who You are. That is my prayer for everyone, Abba. That's my prayer for Your bride. So that when we say yes, so that when we enter the way, so that when we follow Your path, Father, so that when we follow Your Torah, so that we do it out of love, my King. So that we do it because we seek Your presence above all. Thank You, my Father. Thank You for everything in our lives. Thank You. Thank You, yes, thank You for Your blessings. Thank You for Your favor, Father. Thank You. Thank You that You are with us. Thank You that You are the center of who we are. We praise You and we glorify You. Abba, may we find and may we look for You and may we learn about You, Abba. That is my prayer for everyone, Abba. Thank You, my King. We pray all of this in the glorious name of Your Son, our Messiah, our King Yahushua. Amen. Shalom, shalom.